Hello friends, a very warm welcome to Unsarkari. And in this session number 9, we are going to take up biogeochemical cycles. I must remind you here, beginning from the understanding of the word environment, to ecology, to community, to population, and different aspects of ecological systems, we have reached to a stage where we can understand bigger and more conceptual part of both geography and also of environment. Biogeochemical cycles, a very important topic which is going to fetch you at least two questions in the prelims, and also indirect application comes in the mains examination. Do make your own notes, try to note down some critical elements and enjoy the whole process. Do get back for any doubts or clarifications. So the total mass of all the organisms that have lived on earth in the past 1.5 billion years is much greater. Mass of all the organisms is much greater than the mass of carbon and nitrogen atoms present. So according to the law of conservation of matter, we have already seen, even we were speaking about the law of thermodynamics also, the matter is neither created nor destroyed, and obviously carbon and nitrogen must have been used over and over again in the course of time. So earth is neither receiving any great amount of matter from other parts of the universe, nor does it lose significant amount of matter to other part of the space or brahmand. The atoms such as and elements of the atoms of elements such as carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, and the rest are taken from the environment, made a part of some cellular component of an organism, and perhaps by quite circuitous route involving several other organisms are returned to the environment to be used over again. That is why we are using the term cycle. So the cyclic movements of chemical elements of the biosphere between the organism and the environment is known as biogeochemical cycle. It was given by Warndersky, and the bio refers to the term living organisms and geo is to the rock, soil, air and water of the earth. So here it is, there is a constant movement of chemicals between different, you can say, layers of biosphere, and between the organism and the environment. You have autotrophs plants, we have discussed it. You have the water over here, you have the radiant energy of the sun, and then herbivores who are dependent upon autotrophs, and then you have decomposers, and you have nutrients in soil. So there are different elements, and UPSC is asking you again and again ecosystem services. So this understanding will help you to understand better why certain kind of policies and programs are made, and why certain kind of elements are asked in the examination. Types of biogeochemical cycles: gaseous and sedimentary. In gaseous, the main reservoir of nutrients is the atmosphere and the ocean where the gases are stored. In sedimentary, the main reservoir is the soil and the sedimentary rocks of the earth's crust. Both involve biotic and abiotic components, that we agree. Both are driven by flow of energy. Both are tied to the water cycle. So very important key points. What is water cycle? So living organisms, atmosphere and earth maintain between them a circulation of water and moisture. Without water, even human beings can't survive. Our body and even planet earth is having a huge quantity of water. Do check out what percentage. So this circulation of water and moisture is called water or hydrological cycle. Without the cycling of water, biological cycles cannot exist. Ecosystem will be collapsing and not functioning, and life will not be maintained on earth. It is the medium by which nutrients are introduced into autotrophic plants. Similarly, it is an important part of living tissue, that also we agree, either as water or as a form of essential organic molecules. It is serving as a mean of thermal regulation. We have discussed that also, how we maintain our temperature for both plants and animals. It is the medium by which sediments, a prime source of mineral nutrients, are sediments. They are removed or added to the local ecosystem according to the need. We have already discussed how that need arises. And it is covering majority of Earth's surface and is a dominant feature of all aquatic ecosystems. It is driven by solar energy and gravity. More than 80% of the total insolation, that is coming sunlight, is not lost immediately, as electromagnetic radiation goes to evaporate water. So atmospheric water vapor produced by this means then condenses around particles of dust in the atmosphere, that is called nucleation particles. Even when you speak about greenhouse gases, we know how water vapor plays a very important role. The atmosphere possesses limited capacity of holding water vapor, therefore droplets are formed, and they are heavy enough to fall as precipitation under the influence of gravity. नहीं तो कोई बारिश नहीं होती. Eventually, hydrological cycle can be defined as alteration of evaporation and precipitation, with the energy used to evaporate the water being dissipated as heat in the atmosphere as the water condenses. So one hand it is evaporating, other hand it is precipitating, and the cycle goes on. As far as distribution of water on Earth's surface is concerned, it is not evenly distributed. 95% of the water on Earth is chemically bound into rocks and does not cycle. Very important for the prelims. A remainder, about you can say the part which is there in the ocean, it is about 2.1% which exists as ice in the polar caps and permanent glaciers, and the rest is fresh water. You please check out exact percentage of the water distribution, which is very important for the prelims exam. So distribution of evaporation and rainfall is quite uneven. If we compare annual evaporation and precipitation over land and sea, we find that relatively more water precipitates on land than evaporates from land. It is more precipitation which is taking place. This is the fortunate from the point of view of terrestrial organisms, otherwise they will not be able to survive. Even so, the amount of rainfall on the open ocean is proportionately greater than that of land, taking into account the relative percentages of the Earth's surface covered by land and sea. So you see, it is a scientific point which will help you to understand that how exactly the water is distributed and helping the ecosystem to survive. And what is the nature? So nature is the water is evaporated from the surface of ocean, and water vapors form clouds. They cool down, precipitate, and the water is coming down as rainfall, or even it can come up as a hailstorm. It can come as snow. But the several routes are open to precipitation that falls on land. Direct evaporation, transpiration, entry of water into groundwater system, and even runoff. Consequently, the routes of hydrologic cycles can be divided into three main categories, that is rapidly cycling portion or evotranspiration, which includes evaporation and transpiration, and the less rapidly cycling water, that is surface runoff, and very slowly cycling groundwater that seeps into the soil and may end up in any of the categories. So there is all kind of systems which are making sure the hydrological cycles are an ever present phenomena. So you see water chemically bound in rocks, volcanic activity, inland water, evaporation and transportation, atmospheric water vapor, transpiration, precipitation on land, oceans, and you see the global water or the hydrological cycle. You will understand that it is a very very crucial aspect of survival of all organisms, or not forget about just humans. Please do check out and Google, or you can just search about the global water or the hydrological cycle, so that you can exactly get the percentages, because examination will ask you the percentage. Evapotranspiration includes evaporation and transpiration. Evaporation refers to water that evaporate directly from any surface other than plant, such as lake, soil surface, or animal skin. In most cases, the main effect of direct evaporation are to moderate the temperature of local area and to allow hydrological cycle to continue. In some ecosystems, evaporation also leads to concentration of salts in water soil, and it may be critical environment factor. What is transpiration? Is the water that evaporates from surface of leaves of plants. So it acts to move the biological cycles of all mineral nutrients that enter the food chain via the roots of plants. Very important differentiation between evaporation and transpiration. You must be very clear. So stop for a moment and do understand it clearly. Surface runoff is the fact that if transpiration is related to the mechanism of nutrient uptake, as in case of plants we are seeing, the gross movement of soluble and solid particles in the ecosystem is accomplished by runoff. So nutrients that have accumulated in sediments or soil can be eroded by streams. Very true, it is happening because of climate change. Also, it is happening, and removed together altogether from the local ecosystem. That is also agreed. Landslide may also do it, or even flash flood can do it. Or soluble nutrients may be carried by soil seepage into surface waters where they are removed from sea. That is why we say do not disturb natural heritage, which we are doing. So do check out important natural heritage assets in India, very priceless assets. PT question will be coming. So streams may carry sediment particles which can be chemically altered through additional weathering of rocks, so that the nutrient elements they contain may be utilized by organisms. Finally, moving water acts as an agent of erosion, that we have read in NCERT geography also, which removes soil and allows weathering of the underlying rocks to make nutrients available to plants. So very simple but scientific process. What is groundwater? Groundwater is that water that saturates either sediment or the rock below the water table. In general, it is not trapped by plants for transpiration. It is too deep. It is too deep to be directly evaporated from the soil surface. It is an exceedingly important reservoir for water which moves from one place to another under the influence of gravity. So the area where the net water movement is from the surface into the groundwater system called catchment area. Area where groundwater reaches the surface and runs is called springs. A rocky body through which groundwater flows is called an aquifer. A well drilled into an aquifer that has sufficient hydrostatic pressure to force the water up into it is called artesian well. Please do check out examples, whether it is in HP, that is Himachal Pradesh, whether it is in Jharkhand, whether it is in Assam and other parts of Northeast, or whether it is in the Western Ghats. Please do check out the examples and do have the percentage in your mind. Catchment area of rivers Narmada, Godavari, or even Brahmaputra, and some important springs, hot springs also, aquifer also. This kind of understanding is going to help you very much in the prelims examination. Let's see gaseous cycles. The gaseous biogeochemical cycle. There are following types. First, we are taking oxygen. Oxygen is the byproduct of photosynthesis. We know that. Involved in the oxidation of carbohydrates with the release of energy, carbon dioxide and water. बचपन से पढ़ते आए हैं. Its primary role in biological oxidation is that of hydrogen acceptor. Now, this is a scientific word you have to remember. So, the breakdown and decomposition of organic molecules proceeds primarily by dehydrogenation. So hydrogen is removed by enzymatic activity from organic molecules in a series of reaction and finally accepted by oxygen forming water. This is how what you have to remember. So the oxygen is necessary for life, but being very active chemically, molecular oxygen may be toxic to living body cells. Therefore, for the protection from the toxic effects of molecular oxygen, cells process cellular organelles called peroxisomes, which mediate oxidative reactions, resulting in the production of hydrogen peroxide, which in turn is used through the mediation of other enzymes as an acceptor in oxidizing other compounds. So without hydrogen peroxide, nothing is possible. And that's how we have said the primary role is in the biological oxidation, that is of that of hydrogen acceptor. So the major supply of free oxygen which supports life occurs in atmosphere. Already PT asked you. So there are two significant sources of atmospheric oxygen. One is photo dissociation of water vapor, in which most of the hydrogen released escape into outer space. And the other source is photosynthesis, active only since begin of life on earth. Very true, because photosynthesis and respiration are cyclic. We have already discussed the difference in the previous lectures. Involving both the release and utilization of oxygen, one would seem to balance the other, and no significant quantity of oxygen would accumulate in the atmosphere. The cycle continues. So the main non-living oxygen pool consists of molecular oxygen, water and carbon dioxide, all intimately linked with each other, and in photosynthesis and other oxidation reduction reactions, all exchangeable in such components as nitrates, sulfates, which is utilized by organisms that reduce them to ammonia and hydrogen sulfide. So it is not about the brotherhood of human beings only. If there is no brotherhood between oxygen, water and carbon dioxide, nothing else can happen. So on the surface it seems they are different, but there is an intricate 24 into 7 process going on behind our back. So you see, peroxisomes, very important concept. Please do make a short note and remember it for the prelims examination. Now come to carbon cycle. The carbon is being a basic constituent of all organic compounds and major element involved in the fixation of energy by photosynthesis, and it is so closely tied to the energy flow that the two are inseparable, as I just said. The sources of all fixed carbon both in living organism and fossil deposits is carbon dioxide found in the atmosphere dissolved in water of earth also. During photosynthesis, carbon from atmosphere is incorporated into the production of the carbohydrate, glucose and C6H12O6. That is what is glucose. That subsequently may be converted into other carbonic compounds such as polysaccharides, sucrose, starch, cellulose. You will read it. You have already read it in class 7 and class 8 science NCERT, apart from proteins and lipids. So all the polymeric organic compounds containing carbons are stored in different plant tissues as food, and from them carbon is passed on the trophic levels of herbivorous, you can say, the plant, till it serves as a food for decay of organisms. Some of the carbon is returned to the atmosphere or the enveloping aqueous medium in the form of carbon dioxide as a byproduct of plant respiration, in which considerable portion of glucose is oxidized to yield CO2, H2O and energy. So remember this formula, C6H12O6 plus O2 gives CO2 plus H2O plus energy. Small portion of carbon, because 1/6 we are talking about, especially in C, is found not as organically fixed carbon. it is found not, but as a carbonate. It is formed in carbonate form, especially calcium carbonate form. It is very commonly used as shell construction by such animals such as clams. That is, they are kind of mollusks, oysters, and some protozoa and algae. Carbon dioxide reacts with water to form carbonate in the following steps. So CO2 plus H2O brings H2CO3. There is an ion of hydrogen, then bicarbonic acid, and then you have two hydrogen ions plus carbonate. So you see here how it is happening, the carbon cycle. Prehistoric plants form deposits of coal, petroleum, natural gas, and then you have the combustion, atmosphere, it is going to atmospheric carbon, then again photosynthesis is happening, green plants build CO2 into organic compound by photosynthesis, and then again fossilization is going on. And second layer is there, green plants are eaten by the animals are converting material into animal tissue, then you have respiration, along with that decay is going on, and then again atmospheric carbon dioxide, and then photosynthesis. Very important to not only just understand and memorize, but also to close your eyes and revise on your own. The precise amount of each of these constituents in the water depends on the pH of the water. Organisms such as clams can combine bicarbonate or carbonate with calcium dissolved in water to produce calcium carbonate. After the death of the animal, this calcium carbonate may either dissolve or remain in sedimentary form. Agreed. Certain control mechanisms are inherent in the carbon cycle. The rate of carbon utilization is dependent on its availability. So if excessive amounts are there, taken up in any phase of the cycle, the other phases of the activity may be inhibited or slowed down. For example, if the pH of water is alkaline, more carbon is tied up in a carbonate and less in solution. This removal of carbon in solution would upset the equilibrium established between atmospheric and the dissolved carbon dioxide. And the net effect would be the movement of CO2 into solution until equilibrium is on the top of it. Now let's talk about when we say that we need to contain the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by anthropogenic factors. Now just you understand why we say that temperature is rising, because we are not able to contain this much amount of carbon. We are only looking for ways to contain or to cut it down, which we are not able to do, and therefore temperature is rising and whole equilibrium is actually getting disturbed. What are the peculiarities of carbon cycle? So it has got similarity with the other biogeochemical cycles, like we have said water cycles, but it is unusual that the organic phase is not essentially a complete cycle within itself. So organic means biotic and atmospheric means abiotic phases are so closely intertwined that rapidly cycling typical of the organic phase is present. So we want to say that the multiplicity of paths along which carbon can flow is typical of biogeochemical cycles in general, provides a well buffered system with adequate feedback mechanisms to ensure an adequate supply of the carbon. As I just said, it is an ideal situation. All phases of the cycle yield carbon dioxide at some time, and carbon dioxide is the raw material for them also. Thus, despite its relative low concentration in the atmosphere, carbon in a form in which it can be used by living organisms is virtually always present. But this concentration is now changing. That's what I'm trying to say. And that is why the problem is there. It is scientifically proved. So many events are happening because of the change in the concentration, or what we can say, it is a change in the whole equilibrium which is there, which is rising the temperature, and other changes are also there. Let's see nitrogen cycle, essential constituent of different biologically significant organic molecules. Okay, organic amino acids, proteins, pigments, nucleic acids, and vitamins. It is also a major constituent of the atmosphere. 79% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. Paradox is that in its gaseous state, N2 is abundant but unavailable to most of life. But before it can be utilized, it must be converted into some chemically usable form. So use it biologically, the free molecular nitrogen has to be fixed, and the fixation requires input of energy. In a first step, molecular nitrogen has to be split into two atoms, N2 to 2N. The free nitrogen atom then must be combined with hydrogen to form ammonia. So that is how two nitrogen molecules plus three hydrogen molecules is forming 2NH3. And that is how there is a release of energy. Very basic but very important and fundamental step. Without understanding this, you cannot solve any of the questions. So this fixation comes about in two ways. One is the high energy fixation, such as cosmic radiation, meteorite trails, lightning, that provides high energy needed to combine nitrogen with oxygen and hydrogen of water. Similarly, the resulting ammonia and nitrates are carried to the earth in rainwater. This is one method, natural method. The second method of nitrogen fixation, which contributes 90% of the fixed nitrogen of Earth, is biological. So fungi, bacteria, and even some blue-green algae can extract molecular nitrogen from the atmosphere and combine with hydrogen to form ammonia. Last में ammonia बनना चाहिए. Some of this ammonia is excreted by nitrogen fixed organism and thus becomes directly available to other autotrophs. Some of these nitrogen fixing organisms may be free living either in soil जैसे बैक्टीरिया है, एजिटोबैक्टर, क्लोस्ट्रीडियम, और इन वाटर फॉर एग्जांपल ब्रूकिन एल्वी, नॉस्टॉक, क्लेरोथिक्स, एनाबेना. You must remember these names. And they produce vast quantities of fixed nitrogen. In other cases, certain symbiotic bacteria of genus Rhizobium, although unable to fix nitrogen themselves, can do this when it is in combination with other cells from the roots of legumes. Question that is why it comes up over here. Peas, beans, clover, alfalfa, and other angiosperms such as alnus, cyanthus, shepherdia, eleaginous, and myrica, or from the leaves of African genera Rubiaceae and Pavita. So there are different examples. So you see here, root is there, nodule is there, and that is how it is happening. Root leaves of nodule plant, and then this is then transaction of nodule. Then you have single cell of nodule, and nitrogen fixing bacteria is also shown here. Nitrogen fixed by symbiotic and non-symbiotic microorganisms in soil and water is one source of nitrogen. Other source, as I said, is organic matter. So nitrogenous wastes and carrions of animals are degraded by detritus organisms. We already discussed this in the last lecture. What important role do they play? So nitrogen is converted to ammonia form, that is alanine. The amino group NH2 is liberated from the organic molecules to form ammonia. This process is called deamination. So certain specific bacteria like Nitrosomonas can oxidize ammonia to nitrite by reaction. So 2NH3 plus 3 oxygen is bringing you 2NO2 plus 2H2O plus 2 hydrogen. This reaction takes place in soil, in lake or seawater or sediments, and whenever ammonia is being released, oxygen is present. As far as nitrite is produced, other bacteria such as nitrobacter again combine, it can combine nitrite with oxygen to form nitrate by the following reaction. So you see a cycle is going on from nitrite to nitrate, from nitrate to nitrite. Both these reactions, which are performed by two nitrifying bacteria, Nitrosomonas and Nitrobacter, are part of the single biological process called nitrification. So we are discussing what is nitrification. In this process, ammonia is oxidized to nitrate and nitrite, yielding energy. This energy is used by bacteria to make their organic materials directly from carbon dioxide and water. Nitrate can be taken up by autotrophs at the beginning of food chain. So under certain circumstances, nitrate is either not produced in the nitrogen cycle or is degraded before it can be utilized by autotrophs. Degradation of nitrate is called denitrification. So nitrification, denitrification, and we have discussed how it is happening, which we are not even realizing. So you see here, it is very important, nitrogen cycle, nitrates in the soil, nitrosomonas, nitrobacter, then soil nitrates are there, then ammonia, and if I go further, then you have the roots absorption, denitrifying bacteria, nitrous oxide, washed by rains, electric discharge, one element that we discussed, and then you have atmospheric nitrogen that which we discussed, nitrogen fixation, plants, animals and proteins, root nodules, death, saprophytic bacteria, again we were talking about detritus, and then you again it is getting into amino acids, ammonia and its compounds. The cycle is going on. Symbiotic and free living brooding algae, free living nitrogen fixing bacteria, death and decay, ammonifying bacteria. So ammonification, deammonification, and the process continues. Now let's see sulfur cycle. Sulfur cycle, like nitrogen, is an essential part of protein and amino acids and characteristic of organic compounds. It exists in a number of states: elemental sulfur, sulfides, sulfur monoxide, sulfite, and sulfates. So three are important in nature. One is elemental sulfur, second is sulfides, and third is sulfates. The sulfur cycle is both sedimentary and gaseous. It includes gaseous phase and sedimentary phase, as I just said. The sedimentary phase of sulfur is long term, and sulfur is tied up in organic and inorganic deposits. From these deposits, it is released by weathering and decomposition and is carried to terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem in salt solution. So this is one thing. Atmospheric phase of sulfur cycle is less pronounced. So we are talking about two ways. One is sedimentary, other is gaseous. So now we are talking about gaseous. This is less pronounced and it permits circulation on global scale. Sulfur enters into the atmosphere from several sources: combustion of fossil fuels, volcanic eruption, the surface of oceans and gases, and gases released by decomposition. There are different ways by which sulfur is released in the atmosphere. Initially sulfur into atmosphere as hydrogen sulfide H2S, which quickly oxidizes into another volatile form, sulfur dioxide, very dangerous. Atmospheric sulfur dioxide is soluble in water, is carried back to earth through rainwater as weak sulfuric acid, that is H2SO4. Whatever is its source, sulfur is soluble form, and mostly sulfate is absorbed through plant roots where it is incorporated to certain organic molecules such as amino acids, cysteine and proteins from the producers. The sulfur in amino acids is transferred to consumer animals with excess being excreted in the feces. So that's how you say the whole sulfur cycle goes away. So this is how the sulfur cycle is. Please do spend some moments and time and do create in your notebook all these cycles on your own, whether it is water cycle, whether it is carbon cycle, whether it is nitrogen cycle, and whether it is sulfur. You have to do all these biogeochemical cycles so that you can understand the process very well. So this is how it is. Weathering of rocks is one way. Autotrophs, direct utilization of atmospheric sulfur dioxide, animals in the food grazing chain, and then death and waste, detritus food chain, and everything. Volcanic eruption is also bringing it. Combustion of sulfur containing fuels. Then you have spontaneous oxidation in that. This is what I have just discussed. You have to just understand the whole thing which I have discussed with you. Now coming to phosphorus cycle, very important. Phosphorus cycle has no atmospheric phase. It occurs naturally in environment as phosphate or one of its analogues called HPO4, HP2, H2PO4, either as soluble in organic phosphate ions or as soluble organic phosphate ions as a part of soluble organic molecule as particulate phosphate. That is part of insoluble organic or inorganic molecules or even as mineral phosphate as a part of mineral grains as found in rock and sediment. So you have to see that it has no atmospheric phase. Naturally in environment, either it is as phosphate, either soluble, that is inorganic phosphate ions, or as soluble organic phosphate ion, or either as particulate phosphate or as mineral phosphate, as we just said. The ultimate source of phosphate in ecosystem is crystalline rocks. These are eroded, weathered. Phosphate is made available to living organisms generally as ionic phosphate, not iconic. This is introduced into autotrophic plants through their roots, where it is incorporated into living tissues. From autotrophs, it is passed to grazing food chain in the same fashion as nitrogen, sulfur. Excess phosphate being excreted in the fecus. An extreme example of fecal phosphate is the tremendous guano deposits. Very important example built by birds in the deserts of west coast of South America. Very important for the prelims. Phosphate can also be released as particulate matter uh, from forests and grassland fires. Very important. So you see here we have discussed it, that how it is coming from the weathering, that is storage of phosphate in the sediment soil, sedimentary rocks, released to the water oil soil, then autotrophs, animals, death, waste, detritus food chain, everything we have clearly discussed. Please do create your own chain, or I mean to say own graphic representation. Your two revisions are really going to help you to have your own understanding in a clear cut manner. Forest ecosystem dynamics also have tried to show you that how it is, that is the input is there, and then input through rock weathering is there, output is through drainage, the root breakdown, output is there through logs, and then output is through animal migration, input is through solar, plant primary producers, leaching from plants, later falling plants, animal matter, input is through rain and dust. So this is how we can say that all these biogeochemical cycles, they not only work and survive, they make our life worthwhile. Otherwise, I will not be able to speak to you the way I'm talking, and you will also not be able to understand and do anything. So try to understand these biogeochemical cycles linked with the fact what is happening all across, whether we are talking about different kinds of pollution, or whether we are talking about different kind of changes in the atmosphere. And when we talk about why this is important to conserve national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, and please do think about when we speak about our environmental protection act also, how these biogeochemical cycles, which we are not talking every day, they are crucial, integral, and very much fundamental to understanding of life on earth, and very important for the prelims in the environment series. See you in the next lecture. Till then, goodbye, all the best for your studies.